Welcome, welcome everyone to another episode of the You Thrive Everyday show. I am your host, AP, America's favorite life coach. And today we have another very, very special guest, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to introduce Spencer. Spencer, please tell us your full name and what it is that you like to be called.
My name is Spencer Rollins, and I have a nickname that everybody has always called me, and that's Showtime.
Showtime! And so, where are you born and raised? Showtime.
I was born in East Nashville, Tennessee, so I'm from Nashville.
Okay, and so were you raised with both parents in the household?
No, I was raised in a single family household, so I was raised only with my mother.
And so where is that?
My father, he's deceased now, but he lived in Knoxville, so he was not active. I knew who he was, but he was not active in growing up. So, single family household. My mother has several brothers. So it was eight of them, eight kids total, and six were boys. and
Wow.
then my grandfather. So for all intents and purposes, I look at my grandfather like my father. So he was probably the one that was most influential with me.
Okay, and so were all you guys in the same house?
No,
Or
no, no,
okay,
no, no.
okay. So did you have any encounter with your father as a kid? Or you just like knew you had a dad and he was in Knoxville and that was it?
So I knew I had a father. I knew who my father was. He was in Knoxville. You would see, he'll call and check on every once in a while. He would, you know, he was on child support. so, you know, you had that factor. But he wasn't active. I can count the times that he came to visit or different things of that nature. So growing up, I met my grandparents one time on that side. So they came and visited me when I was a little kid. But for the most part, I didn't grow up around my father's side of the family or really know anyone on that side of the family till I was in my mid 20s.
Okay. And so as a kid, what does that look like? Now that you're, older, of course, how do you think that affected you growing up without a father?
I think that now that I look on it, I think that it made me, I was bitter, in a lot of ways, but it also made me more insightful. So from a standpoint of, I always had I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I didn't grow up with, there was a lot of challenges, right? With growing up that way. But I always had the attitude that if it was not, nothing's given, everything, you pretty much earn it. And so I had it, for the longest, either get with me or get ran over. So that type of attitude, I've always been very, and I think a lot of that came from not having that father figure in the house. And then it also made me a lot more of a protector. So even as a kid, I remember going around the house and it was a low income housing area, and you hear gunshots and different things like that. But every night, I would get my little, as a kid, like 4 or 5 years old, I would get my toy guns and go look up under the cabinets, and then so I always had that instinctive stuff to, go around and try to, be that protector for my mom. So, and even to this day, I'm that guy that, my mom and, the different women in the family call like, oh, so I'm like little big brother or, everybody, the one that everybody calls. And I think a lot of that, again, just comes from, I didn't have the opportunity to just not be that alpha in the house. I literally was just born into being that alpha.
Okay, so you talked about a silver spoon and
Hmm.
challenges. So for some of us that didn't have that silver spoon, we think like, what the hell kind of challenges did you have with a silver spoon?
Well, I had other family members that grew up around me, right? That had both mother and father in the house. So, so I got a chance to see it directly, right? So, for example, my idea of a family vacation was I can remember one time getting on a bus, a Greyhound bus, and riding to Detroit, Michigan. Or the first time I ever stayed in a hotel, with room service, was, an uncle took me, right? So meaning that I had other family members, that was something they just did all the time. They just would go, so meaning or like school field trips. I remember going to school and um having to say I forgot my money because I didn't have lunch money that day. Some different things like that that were going on, or I didn't get a chance to go on. It was a trip to Land Between the Lakes. I'll never forget that. The day went on. It was a trip that everybody in my class got a chance to go to. Well, my mother couldn't afford to go, so I was the only one that didn't go. But then I also had to go to make add insult to injury. I was in sixth grade. I had to go in the fifth graders class because I was the only one that didn't go. So I had to go back a grade in doing that. So those are the type of things that I remember that was a challenge. But I would also turn that into how do I make money then, right? So I would take that same, around that same time frame, I would go not eat lunch for a couple of days, take that money, go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of candy. Then I would go sell the candy and then make money off of it. So then I would end up making money or always had money. I was like, that's never going to be something that's going to happen to me again because I'm going to be able to go do this on my own. So,
Wow.
it was kind of one of those, I just had that mindset like, okay, so this happened. What can I do to fix that so that this type of thing doesn't happen again?
Wow, that's great. You was a little hustler. I see. I see. Okay. So, how many siblings did you grow up with?
None.
None. So you were the only child in the house?
Yep.
Wow. So tell me the dynamic between you and your mother because I know a lot of single mothers that have boys, and then once they hit, you know, 11, 12, 13, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Sometimes they act out, as we call it, or have temper issues, or there's just a lot of issues with the mother and son dynamic. What kind of issues did you guys have?
That is probably an accurate statement. My mother is a very strong woman. But of course, when I got that right around that, when puberty started hitting and you start smelling yourself and all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's a lot of issues that happen, right? So one, I'm wanting to hang out and kind of do stuff that I probably shouldn't, have been doing. And then of course she's trying to keep me on the narrow. And then around the same time, she was, having a lot of struggles financially, right? So, it's a lot of things that were all happening right around that same time. And then so I'm at that pivotal age where, I'm out fighting and acting a fool out, doing different things, and then she's trying to, you know, figure out, hey, how do I keep the house? How do I keep the car? How do I do this? How do I do that? And then she's trying to balance, a knucklehead on the other end. So, to that point, right when I turned 18, I think the thing that probably saved my life and turned a lot of stuff around for me is my mom sent me to Denver, Colorado. So, and what triggered that was, we actually had lost a car. So I'm going, from, you know, it's a lot of stuff that was happening around then. So and of course my mind said, all right, I'm gonna go figure out how to make this work. A dummy that is listening to gangster rap music and kind of in the hood listening to that kind of stuff and figuring out, oh, I'm gonna go figure this out. That's probably the wrong age because that's when you're gonna run into a lot of problems. And so I had a bunch of I never got arrested, never got in trouble, but I had a bunch of very very close calls that I probably should have got in trouble for. Let's put it that way. And then so some things that happened where even like so my name is Spencer. I'm named after one of my uncles, right? So It was a bad encounter where I ended up, beating up my uncle. So he was old, and it was just some stuff happened. So the issue was he was drinking and kind of got a little beside himself. I was already frustrated. I had all of these other things that were going on, and I just snapped and lost it. And so that particular thing, I think, just set my. She was like, "Yeah, you starting to get into too much stuff. You fighting too much. You staying into this. It's you know, it was a lot of stuff going on. Where every time I left the house, I would always have a. She knew I had a gun, but I had a gun at a very young age, right? So all of those things happening, and that's where yeah, you need to go. And so I had an aunt that lived in Denver, Colorado, and that aunt actually, I think, was a major part of really saving my life.
And how did that happen? Did she provide some kind of discipline for you? Like
No, it
how did
really wasn't that. It took me into an environment that was uncommon. So, from that standpoint, I didn't have the same everything that I knew. So I'm in Denver. The and she actually lived in the hood in Denver. It was an area called Park Hill, and so that area is just back at that time was full of bloods, right? So the gangs and stuff that I knew, everything that I knew was just totally different up there. Those cats dressed different, they acted different, they moved different, and so and then when I moved up there, that really kind of I took advantage of some of the opportunities that were there. So I actually, while I was there, I ended up I met this guy, and then he's like, "Hey man, have you ever thought about going to college?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to go." Right? I Because growing up here, I always marched in band, real active and doing that kind of stuff, and so um I actually started a community college up there. So, and I hated the school, by the way. I just absolutely hated it because it was nothing like I was expecting college to be. I'm thinking of, a different world type of thing. So,
yeah.
yeah, so it was like nothing like that in Denver. Nothing. It was a commuter school. It was a community college of Denver. So it was like three schools on one campus, but it was nothing like I was expecting. And then I got a little job, and so really I started kind of moving in a different way. So I didn't engage into that same crowd. I didn't have, and I didn't have any connections in that crowd, and everybody I was around was positive, right? And then I didn't have the same pressures that I had when I was at home, right? I wasn't worried about, okay, there was a car. There was, things, that my aunt always made sure I had a good steady foundation. So those pressures were not there. So I think more of anything that was driving, like if you put anybody or any animal or anything in a corner and you don't give them a way out, you, I mean, they're gonna come out fighting. And a lot of times they could do more damage than good because they feel like afraid. It's almost like a dog. You get a dog that's really scared and you're trying to help him, he's liable to bite you just because of fear. And that's really more of where I was of, not necessarily knowing how to maneuver and getting myself out of a situation, but I was probably lashing out of fear of not knowing what to do. And then how I was thinking you do it was definitely leading me down the wrong path. And I
Wow.
didn't have those same pressures.
Mhm. And so how long were you in Denver?
I stayed there for about a year and a half, and then from there, my aunt again, she was like, "Look, man, this boy, I had a cousin that was up there as well, and and he ended up going to Bethune Cookman, right? So, and this particular cousin, it was the same scenario. The same aunt, took him in. He grew up in Nashville as well. He was a knucklehead, and then so he went to Denver. And then so I ended up going to Denver. And then while we were there, he ended up going to Bethune Cookman in Florida. And so I was like, man, I really wanted to go to school. I was in the marching in the band, so like, at Jackson State, Tennessee State. So I marched in bands like that. So I that was a driving thing to want to get back down south. So I ended up going to Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. So they gave me a small band scholarship, but it was just enough to get me down there. And then my aunt was like, "All right, we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna make it happen." So my mom, she ended up moving to Denver too because of different things here. So things were better for her in Denver, and then you had the support of my aunt, and my aunt looked out for me, and that's how I ended up at Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee.
Wow. So just to rewind just a little bit. So what was the dynamic like with your aunt? Like what was her personality type?
My aunt is, I mean, fun, jovial, just really. I mean, she's just awesome. You know, she's always been that fun aunt, and she's always looked at me like her son that she never had. Right? She has two daughters, but I was that son. You know, and years before they were born, and when she came, to Nashville, I was the the one like, all right, I got to figure out how to go to get on Johnny. Well, I'm gonna go catch the bus. I'm gonna go over there. So I was figuring out how to, get by my aunt. So she's awesome. She's always been that way.
Nice. Okay, so now we're at Lane College. What is that experience? Was it what you were expecting? Was it more? Was it less? What's going on?
So again, Lane gave me an opportunity, right? So meaning that when I finished high school, I did all right at, good enough to graduate and no, but I never have been a good test taker. So when I went to school in Colorado, I actually I had to take remedial classes out of all things. Lane took me, no problem, and it was the band was horrible, to be honest. So that was the thing I went down there for, but they had a band. And then it was not in Nashville, but it was in Tennessee. So it was close enough to home, but far enough that I didn't have that same thoughts. So I didn't have those same pressures. So again, when I was there, I always, had money or different things. I would cut hair and all that kind of stuff. So I always had just different things kind of going. So it all worked out, right? So and Lane was, is a true HBCU. It was one of those environments where, baby, come on over here. You want some extra food? You looking out for you. Or it was a restaurant around the corner from the school, and the lady, I would go over there and put my little money together, and she was like, babe, here, take you an extra plate home. So it was one of those environments where everybody just looked out for you.
Nice. Okay, so earlier before we were talking about a little bit about your childhood and going into adolescence, teenagehood, and you used the word bitter.
Hmm.
So what did we do with all this bitterness and a little bit of rage that we had going on inside of us?
Well, let's talk about like so the the bitterness was, when I did talk to my father, it was I remember a couple of conversations. I'm sure he was like, yeah, I don't want to ever talk to him again. So when I did talk with him, it wasn't, you know, oh, cuz so let me take it, let's put it this way. My father is very well accomplished. My father was when he passed away, he was on CNN when he died,
Mm.
right? So he was very well, well known and was a pillar in the community and all of these, type of things, which was great. So whenever I talked to him, it was, oh, here's all these great things I did. Here's this, and here's that, or here's a newspaper clipping, or here's this, that, and the other. But that made me more bitter because what does that have to do with me? Right? So like, I'm out here fighting. I'm out here acting a fool. I'm out here, dealing with, females and all this kind of stuff. That, like I didn't have that somebody really to like, hey man, let me put you on this path, or let me hip you to this, or wait a minute, this is not how you do this, right? So I didn't have that, right? So I ended up bumping my head a lot of times, and that really frustrated me, all the way down to you know being at Lane. To this day, I could pay off the school loans, but it's probably the best debt you got. But I still have school loans. My father was, he ended up one time I was at school. He said, "Oh yeah, one of my best friends is the, chairman of the board of directors." I'm like, dude, I got, like a very high GPA, very active in doing all of this stuff, and you could have made, that could have been a game changer for me, right? Those are the type of things that were frustrating to me. That I look back at my father and I'm like, man, this is, it was a complete miss, right? And then, even on top of that, I got it was very interesting even when I moved to Denver because I have a brother, an older brother, and an older sister that I didn't meet till I was in my mid 20s, right? So now I'm close with both of them now, and the kids, why, all that kind of stuff. But again, that's frustrating because I was the secret that happened in Nashville, and he kept me secret from the rest of the family.
I
So
got you.
yeah.
I got you. Okay, so now it's making sense because I was
Hmm.
gonna say, like, did we ever have that conversation? Like, you're so great. Why are you like leaving me in the corner? Like, why are you leaving baby in the corner?
Yeah, so that's the deal. Like I didn't know that none of them didn't know who I was and all this kind of other stuff, but he was,
So what was he married and he cheated on his wife and you were the okay. Okay.
yep. So essentially he was 10, 12 years older than my mom,
Okay.
right? And so that means he was right around his 30s or something like that, and my mom was like 19, 20. And he lived in he was, just think about it. He's big time cat, coming into town, all these nice hotels, business guy. You didn't have Facebook and all this kind of stuff going on back then,
Exactly.
right? So he's, come in whining and dining her and all this kind of different stuff. And, she thinking she's about to get married to this dude, but she didn't know that a year or two before that he had just got married. So um then, I guess there was an encounter too, and then next thing you know, here come the big thick eyebrows, just like his.
Right. This is so this is very interesting for me because there's somebody in my life whose story is very similar to this. And
Hmm.
then to account for the time, you know what I'm saying? During this era, it was a lot of that going on where men, actually had a family here at home, children, wife, and then a whole nother house over here with a woman and a couple of kids over here, and in some situations there were several homes with children that they were producing and still married and in an actual home with the wife. And it was very common back in those days.
And then
Okay.
what made that even, I guess, rougher is because she was very accomplished and doing her thing, but she knew who I was, but never wanted to acknowledge it. And so that was a major part too of me. One, I don't care how you look at it. If a man wants to spend time with his child or be there as a child, is nobody gonna stop him, right? But she also was one, but she was never able to have kids by him. So because she was never able to have kids by him, right? He had two kids prior. Then I came along that happened while they were together, and it was fresh together, right? They were only married a couple of years. That really just made her always hate me.
Of
So
course.
even to the day she died, I mean the day he died, it was drama. I mean, all the way to the funeral, it was drama with her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she told me if I came to the funeral, she was gonna call the police on me.
Did you go?
I sat on the front row.
I know you did.
I'm not very easily
That
yeah, yeah, don't
was
come
like
to me
a
like that.
dare.
Yeah, I sat on the front row. Matter of fact, I sat right like if you looking at the body, I sat right by his head on the front row,
I know that's right.
beside my brother and my sister.
Okay. So after college, what goes on after college? Because you were very involved in school,
Well,
right?
yes, but that drove a lot of things, right?
Mhm.
So again, y- that's one of the things I think that's been a blessing is every time there's been an issue, I try to overcompensate and figure out how to fix it. So as a result of that, it was a lot of blessings that came of that that's been able to bless so many others, right? So, for example, while I was at Lane, excuse me, I pledged a fraternity. And one of the things that happened when I pledged that it was several of us there that, we looked at the campus it was like a lot of cats from the hood from all of these different, cities, so it wasn't like a Princeton, when people come and they get dropped off, at school with their moms and dads Benzes and all this kind of stuff. It was cats that came in on from the Greyhound bus from East St. Louis, Detroit, Chicago, and their parents couldn't afford luggage, so they came in with double like duffel bags of trash with their stuff in it. Everything that they could get in those bags, that's what they brought to school, right? And then when they got dropped off at the school kind of took care of them. But a thing that we all knew was there was not a lot of fathers there, that were involved in with a lot of the students. So what we ended up doing is we started something called Ready and Ready. So it's an acronym, with our chapter that we say if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So you're forever ready. And what we ended up doing is like, dude, how do we fix this? So every time one of the guys in our chapter, we started just with our chapter, would have a baby, we'd have a thing called a Red E, where we would come together, support that brother. The only people that are invited are the mother, her mother, his mother, and guys that are close to him. Because whenever a woman has a baby, it's all about that woman, right?
Exactly.
And then whenever the baby comes, it's not about neither one of them anymore. It's all about the baby, right? But in that whole process, what's missing from that household? The man. What is the one that is really crucial that you're seeing statistically and everywhere is the man being there and being accountable. So what we did was one, we were holding, our brothers accountable. So if you off here, shooting off some kids, you need to make sure you being accountable for that, right? But then also they need to know that there's other guys that are around them that they can have that support system. A lot of guys, they'll have a kid and then not necessarily know because they didn't grow up in a household with the kid, so or they were not act or their father wasn't active with him. How can you know how to be active with your kids if you didn't have that as a role model to show you how to do it? So
Exactly.
the Red E, what it's we would come with gifts and different things of that nature, but it was also a time where other guys could give guys a wise counsel. Hey man, this is what you need to expect. This is how this is going to work. All the way down to, hey man, she may have postpartum this. This is how you need to deal with her. This is how you need to deal with this, that. So giving a guy that type of advice and it's in a more of a safe place, it's awesome. So we started doing that with each guy that had a kid. And then the visuals, because we say a pledge while we're there, right? I'm ready to be a father. I'm ready to be accountable. So it's certain things we say to that, but behind that, every woman wants to be protected. So that woman being seeing that, oh, this is the man that I'm happy that is either my husband or is my child's father, but this is the network of men that he got behind him. So when he comes up short or this, that, and the other, I know I got these guys that I can depend on and they're gonna look after me. So then we started doing that with all of our chapter brothers. Then it went out to like family members. Then it went out to other organizations. Then so it's several people that have done this Red E for different guys. So for just about all my cousins or different ones that are around, and it's something that it really you can see every last one of these guys. They're very active with the kids. They're very active, doing things. But that was birthed. That idea was birthed out of the pain of so many guys that didn't have that type of role model that was there. So even when I had my daughter 3 years ago, it was beautiful, to see all of these guys and really to see all of the guys that I did Red E's for over the years came back, to mine. So those are the type of things that I think that were birthed out of some of that frustration.
That is so beautiful because as we talk about it, I didn't forgot the percentage now. It's like so high. It's like I know it's over 80% of um black families don't have a male present in the home. And that is a huge percentage. And I have been asking black men, like what are we doing about this? Especially the men that are in their children's lives. Like every man knows several men that are not in their children's lives. And it's
Hmm.
like we have to start holding each other accountable. You know what I mean? Like you don't get along with the baby mother, and or it's all of that is is a non-factor to this little life. And like you said with counsel, um that can be dealt with because you have so many people that have went through those experiences that can guide you through. um so how do we go about making this movement bigger, because that's a huge deal.
So, one of the things that, every organization that I've been a part of or different things. So, we started this, with my chapter, right? And then those guys did it. And so just think about it. These are guys that are in Jackson, Tennessee, that have moved back home to Houston, moved back home to Detroit, moved back home to Nashville, to Memphis. So it's encouraged. Every line that comes into that chapter to this day, that's something, man, I crossed in 97, right? So every line that has crossed, that's something that hey, dude, if your LB or somebody does this, man, one of y'all need to make this happen. But then also go take that and do it for your family members, friends, guys that you know, guys that you respect. Go do this. Take it to your church. Take it to wherever, right? Then, I came here. I'm a Mason. I did it with, my Mason brothers. Now you got all of these guys are doing it. Some of them have branched and moved to other areas. And so, that's how it's birthed. I've got the video of my ready. I can share that with you. So when you post this, you can put it in the comments or whatever. But it really gave a lot of the background, and you can kind of really see how powerful that is, right? But so that's how we're kind of going about doing it, and it's more um, is organic as possible to make sure that it makes sense. Because I like, for example, there are some guys that they may have a kid and they didn't get a ready, right? I got a family member that I mean very close with him, and if when he had his kid, he was like, dude, this is not my kid. Then it came out, it was his kid. And now he has a very close relationship with his kid years later. But at that time, he was bitter, he wasn't ready, and he was not ready to be a father. So it doesn't make sense to go do something of that nature for at that time because he was not mentally there. Now he has matured into that and he's an excellent father now, but at that time, he had to come to grips with that.
Right. So if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit of your journey, um, to the beginning stages of fatherhood, because I know you started off wanting a kid. Can you kind of take me through that journey?
Well, I ended up having, a kid later, because let's see, my daughter is 3 now, and I'll be 45 in June, right? So I got married a little later, and so it was a typical dude, I had, fun and different things before, I got married,
How
and
old were you when you got married?
probably mid 30s, something like that. So yeah, I was about 35, something like that when I got married. So, still, a little older, but 35 when I got married. And, we were married several years before, the baby came along. But, even before that, so, the first chick I had sex with when I was at 15, she came back 2 days after we had sex and said, "Hey, I'm pregnant." So, so that kind of that scared the hell out of me from that standpoint. And so I always was, pretty careful, growing up and all these other things. So, I wasn't just out there shooting the club up, but uh, so that's what kind of I guess delayed things from my end. And I guess everything happens in God's time, but I think that even me having a kid later, it again changed my mindset because I think earlier I was so focused on success. I was so driven. I was so, you know, had to get these things done. I would never be in a place where, you know, like when I started out, working, I always felt that how like when you move out of your parents' home, I always knew that I didn't have a safety net like other people did. So either I got to figure out how to make it, and I got to make it, and I got to, like I got to make this count. So I literally have always been on a grind in trying to figure that. And then what's the next thing? What's the next thing? I'm very goal oriented. So I got to knock this out. I got to get this business going. I got to get this going, right? So because of that, if I would have had a kid at an earlier age, that probably would have affected my effectiveness in being a father, right? Not saying I wouldn't have loved the kid any less, but that would have impacted something, right? So my drive, I wouldn't have been, as driven, or I would have not been as, involved with my kid, right? So, like, to this day now that, my daughter probably can remember 2 times since conception to now, or 3 times, I can count them, 3 times from conception to now that I wasn't at the doctor's appointment with her. So that those are the type of any doctor's appointment. So those are the type of things that again have pushed me over into a different direction when it comes to making sure I'm there for a kid. And then I think also what helped it was making sure that I was better than my father. So my daughter would never have the same struggles that I went through or different things than yeah, that would never be the case.
So, as a father, tell me, going through the process, because she's still a little, she's only 3.
Mhm.
So, I know that there was a change as soon as she, entered, left the canal. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Tell me, what changes you went through mentally becoming a father at your age.
There's so many of them, man. Um, I always have been one of those responsible guys that's gonna take it like like again, like I'm making sure everybody get their COVID vaccine. I'm taking people to go do this. Like I'm always been that guy, but to have something so small and so precious that their everything is there. You got to burp them all the way down to like, dude, what is this black poop coming out? Like, I didn't realize that babies had this that thick black whatever this stuff is to come out to put like it just it was such a like, and I grew up around kids again, right? But that was something that was just so different to actually have a kid that is you're 100% responsible for everything. And then, as she's even growing, you know, she's watching you move. She's watching you do this. She's watching how you handle this. She's watching how you interact. So, all of those things, it changes you and makes you a lot calmer on how you interact and do things, right? And it makes me more thoughtful how I'm doing stuff because I know that this one here, man, she's smart as a whip. She's watching everything I do, right? So if I know she's watching everything I do, I've got to make sure I'm setting a standard for her of this is the type of things that a man should do, or this is the type of daddy I got.
Wow. So how does that balance work? Because like you said, you've been such a driven man, as far as chasing success. You have a crazy hustle, crazy ambition. And then your wife is also a go-getter herself. You know what I mean? So it's like you guys are very career orientated people, and in your 40s, you know what I'm saying? You're pretty much, hardwired. So how do you guys balance all of that?
To me, it's
A
priorities.
relationship with yourselves and then your
To,
child.
to me, it's all about priorities, right? So my child reprioritized everything that was important to me. So that is it. So I'm still very driven. I'm still knocking things out of the park in the areas that I'm doing stuff. But like in my regular 9 to 5, I changed my 9 to 5 to an environment that is great, but I probably, I could be further than where I am, but I would rather be comfortable, right? And then even with my side businesses, those are still, so I put more effort in a side business or my side businesses that are generating more income, but those are things that she would be able to benefit from. So, even to the point of like yesterday, I'm starting her now to have that business mindset already, right? So by the time she's like, when it comes down to when her and my side business is real estate, right? So by the time she gets to a point where she needs um, um, what do you call it? When the you allowance. By the time she gets allowance, her allowance is going to come from the businesses, right? So she's going to help pick tenants. She's going to help, with those type of things. So if a tenant doesn't pay, you don't get allowance. So she starts learning those type of things from the beginning on how to will and deal, how to, talk to people, how to, start using your gut, start how to, those type of things. Like, and so I'm a teacher. Like, she's following me now to see how I move, and I'm teaching her the game. These are all the things that I wish was given to me. So I'm giving her everything that I'm trying to be the father that I wish I had.
Okay. And then, so how about personal time, with you and your wife? Because, I mean, you work, you got side hustles, she works. Like, where are you guys finding the time for just the relationship?
That probably is a challenge because I think both of us, our happy place is keeping her happy.
Right. Right.
So, that's probably a bigger deal. So it's just like, both of us, you'll probably see the biggest smile on our faces looking and making her happy, or we're, working on doing something for her, right? So that's kind of that's probably how that works. But that's a challenge I think for everybody. So, and that's one I probably, I can't say I got that one figured out. So
Exactly.
that's a work in progress.
So tell me, what is your fear as far as fatherhood?
My
What scares
biggest
you?
fear, what my biggest fear is giving her the opportunity and her making bad decisions that I can't control. I know it sounds crazy, but like, think about it from the standpoint of, I've got another, close family member that, or a person that I knew, that their parents gave them everything. I mean, they had every opportunity in the world and they blew it every step of the way. And because they didn't have to grind and work for it. So it's balancing that, make sure she has that hustle and drive and feed that to make it where she wants to go get it, and don't quench it by giving her everything where she thinks it's, oh, you owe me this, right? So that's the biggest thing in trying to do that, but like, encourage her to know that she can do anything in the world as long as she grind on it. Encourage her to know that, like, you may not be the best, you may not be the most talented, you may not be the smartest, but I always felt that you will never outwork or never out hustle me. So I've always been successful because I had the grind and I would put in the work past whoever was around or competing with me. So, feeding her to do that is, that's where I struggle to make sure that she feels loved, she feels, secure, she feels safe, but then but I still want to make sure she, like, nah, you gonna have to get up and get some of this, yourself. This is not gonna always just be given to
So,
you. So,
I'm sorry, I have to laugh because like you're a father raising a girl. You're not in control as a parent. You're not in control.
And that's the
they're
biggest thing that
they're
scares
a
me
whole
because it's
nother
like,
life, a whole nother entity, and the
man,
deal.
and because like for example, things are so simple to me, because like it's gonna take that one dude that's gonna come to the house, and then I know she's gonna be like, "But Daddy, you don't know anything." But Billy said, like, "What? Who the fuck is Billy?" Like that type of thing is just that scares the hell out of me because I got another family member, right? She's like, "Hey, this is the guy I'm dating," and I said, "I mean, 2 minutes." I said, "He's gonna be a problem." Well, how you gonna know that? You don't. I said, "It's a couple things you can tell, especially as a man, about this dude." And I sized them up, and I mean, years later, she came after she got married to him, had a baby by him, and now she divorced. She was like, "Unc, I should have listened to you." Right? If and the thing is, everything that I told her about him, it ended up coming true. And I was like, "Look, man. I mean, that's just like a woman. You could look at another woman and you could size up a woman really quick just because of how she moved without just a lot of, you just feel it. Men can do the same thing with men. So I'm like, man, I could tell you that this is what's going on with this cat, right? And that's the thing that scares me because, you know, she's an only child, probably gonna be an only child, right? And, yeah, that's just so I got one shot to get this right.
No,
Right?
not at all. You're gonna have a trillion shots to get it right because what's great is, and I hope you can receive this. But what's great is we can never get it wrong. Like what we call bad choices, what we even call evil, is ignorance. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? And every situation, that's how perfect God and this whole orchestration is that we call life. It's perfect. It's divinely perfect in the fact that every lesson has to be learned, and that's how they're learned is through challenges. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? So it's like I know we all want to stop our loved ones, whether they're a mother, a daughter, any loved one from bumping their head. But the deal is that it's counterproductive to stop them from bumping their head because you're stopping them from expanding their own consciousness.
Hmm.
You know, so it's like you're gonna have to get ready and get some patience and learn how to swallow some things.
Oh man, I could see that because my daughter, if you can't tell, I'm a alpha male. I have an alpha personality, right? And my daughter is very much an alpha personality. So I could just, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's definitely gonna
It's
be interesting.
sometimes you're gonna have to grit your teeth and just smile because I was that girl. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Where I can literally tell you that I spent 4 years of my life, probably from 18 to no longer than that, from 18 to about 23, doing something that made me miserable. But just because my mama kept digging in, like, stop it, don't do that, da, 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 da. So then I dug in, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm older, I look back like that was stupid, it was retarded, it was ignorant. But that's my journey. I have an issue with authority. I'm not meant to be a follower, I'm meant to be a leader. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I do have a problem listening to something that I feel like I need to take this journey, but you're telling me not to. But I need to take this journey. Something is
Mm-hmm.
telling me to take this journey. So now I'm gonna fight you on it when I could have just took the journey, learned, and you should have just been there for me when I came back and bumped my head, you know what I'm saying, and nursed me and then told me what
Mm-hmm.
the hell I did wrong. So then I can move on and not do it again and not do what we call those cycles. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? Because that's what ends up happening is those cycles. We just keep doing it over and over again because we're rebelling. We're fighting. We're fighting the fight.
Yeah. I can see it, man. It's that's a fear of even like trying to overcompensate because of because everybody has some kind of baggage, right? So my baggage of growing up, I one, my child gonna know who their daddy is. Like the daycare, those people, like when I pull up in the parking lot, they like, oh, that's Aubrey's daddy. But I always take care of them, right? I'm gonna buy lunch, at least once a month for the daycare, staff and stuff like that. So they love me to death, but I'm also that dude. Like, hold on, now my daughter got 3 mosquito bites on her, so we need to talk about this. What are we doing to deal with some of these mosquitoes around here? So it's that type of deal. Like, hey man, let's I'm all fun and games, but let's make sure we take care of the business over here. And but that's definitely a challenge, with me of not in some ways overcompensating and giving. I know that's going to be a challenge for me, right? Because like when my daughter came from the hospital, from the time I brought her home from the hospital, I literally had my daughter had a motorcade when I
Yeah.
brought her home from the hospital, right? So straight up coming to America motorcade, and I had like they stopped traffic to bring my daughter home. Like it what we didn't stop at no lights. We didn't, and they called it like they literally called the police on. Like, dude, who the hell is like, what's going on down here? Why are these motorcycles down here? Why is this down here? Like, what's going on? So, and it was outside of the cafeteria where where the I guess the baby unit was upstairs. And then, they called upstairs. It's like, security did, saying, like, we got a call down here. What's going on? It's like, oh, Baby Rollins is going home. Who the hell is Baby Rollins? Like, what is going on? You know? So it was funny, man. We left, man. I got a video of it. The security guys like, man, what the hell is going on right here, man? But like
It's Obama's cousin.
right. But that's how my baby came home from the hospital. Like on her 16th birthday, I did a video. I'm gonna show her that video and say, now this is how your daddy brought you home, right?
Yes,
So
you
she,
did. I just have to say it because I watched the video. I was like, this Ninja Showtime. He
my
lives
name is
up to his
Showtime.
name. Go big or go home. Okay,
Hmm.
so we're gonna wrap this up, but I would like for you to give us to send us off with a message. So let's just say we have a young man who is coming up and he's about to be a father and he is not ready. He is not ready. He is not ready. He is not ready. But he knows in his heart he needs to do the right thing, but he's not ready. What advice do you have?
So it's a couple of things I'll say. One, with a young man or a man, period, at that point, it's not about you anymore. You got a life that's totally depending on you and someone to give them guidance and love them. It's not about money. It's about time, and it's about spending that time, right? So it really matters, man. And the joys that you would get from that is unparalleled. All the way down to your kid farting on you and stuff like that. It's just like it's funny, as nasty as it is. Somebody peeing on you or pooping on you, all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. But it's still it's unparalleled. And I would also say that I hear and I see so many scenarios where the mother makes it challenging, right? Figure out how to do it where you're never disrespecting her, even if you don't like her, right? Because the bigger picture is you're trying to be with the kid, not the baby. So if you got to go to get like to the point, I helped a guy this week, like, dude, here's an attorney, because the child's mother was just acting a fool because she got a new dude in her life, and so this guy is a issue. It's just that kind of stuff, dude. Go get an attorney, spend the time with the kid. And the older the kid gets, they're gonna know what the problem is. And
Right.
you need to make sure that it's not you, right? And do whatever you can do to just spend that time, because the influence that you have over that child is, because, like, my wife is great, but I could see problems if I wasn't here. I made up for the things that she made mistakes on, right? And then vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
How I would handle stuff like, no, you don't do this because I said so. Well, she's a little bit more like, wait a minute, let me explain it to you, and this is that and the other, and then she reacts better to that. I was like, again, it's that balance. Sometimes you got to be the heavy, sometimes you got to be that balance. But if you're not in the picture, you're not even giving the child an option, right? And then what essentially is going to happen is you could be birthing or have birthed, right? Or I guess a guy wouldn't have birth, but been a part of creating a cycle that will be never ending where they'll end up not being accountable to kids that they brought into this world, right? So, I could follow the same path my father followed, or, I'm active doing this in the community. I got this title, I'm doing this. When I said earlier, I reprioritize. I give a damn about nothing else going on. But if my daughter has a doctor's appointment, I don't care about work. I don't care about organization. I don't care like if it's a birthday party or just it's something going on at her school, wacky tacky day, and she say, "Daddy, I want you to come to school." My butt gonna be at the school. But she will look back on those things when it's all said and done. And when I'm on my deathbed, I'm never gonna look back and think the one that I'm leaving on this earth that will influence other lives and mourn me the most when I'm gone will never have the thing of saying my daddy wasn't there. My dad, I wish he would have been more active. My daddy was active in doing all of these other things. He influenced all these other kids. He did all this other stuff, but he wasn't there for me. So I make sure that she's number one. So my message to guys is, man, make sure when it's all said and done, you're not gonna wish you worked an extra hour at work. You're not gonna wish you attended one more extra meeting. You're not gonna wish you went to the club one more time. You're not gonna wish any of those different things. But on that deathbed, you're gonna wish and be you either gonna be thankful or you're gonna wish that you spent that time to build that relationship with your family. Because when it's all said and done, your family is gonna be the one that's gonna be there to support and love you. And if you don't build that tie, all you're gonna do is either when you go dead and gone, that person could be not thinking about going to your grave, cussing you out every time they're thinking about it, or they're sitting there talking about you and referring to you in the highest manner because of the love that you poured into them. So make those things count yourself. Don't let any excuse come up of why not. Your baby mama, I mean your girlfriend now don't like your baby mama. What that got to do with the kid? Either get her right. I mean, this is on you as a leader, right? Either
Right.
get her mind right, or this is what you need to do, or hey, move on. One way or the other. Either get, I mean, but again, that goes back to my personality, right? Either get with the program or get left. But that goes back to you grabbing your balls and acting like a man. So all of these things come around, and but also being cool and humble enough to deal with that child's mother because truth be told, she controls a lot of the keys of the kingdom when you're there. So being, able to deal with her the best way possible, and that makes sense. And some of these things I haven't had the experience of dealing with that, but I have helped and I have witnessed a lot of guys going through that. So that's my thing, man. Don't let anything come in the way that be an excuse of you not being the one to influence your child. So you can either influence them to a point of success or you could influence them to literally be unsuccessful or let somebody else influence it into a way that it could be detrimental to them. You could be the one to save their life just by spending time.
Wow. Look, I feel like we need to give a round of applause. Well, thank you. I think on that note, that was a great way to end this little session right here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the You Thrive Everyday show. We want to thank you, Spencer, for coming in and sharing your life with us. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in. We will see you guys again soon on another episode of the You Thrive Everyday show. Peace, bliss, and love, everyone. See you soon.
Peace.